Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, you might almost think it's St. Patrick's Day because Byron and I are both in green today, but it's not.
Memo.
I guess we're in sync today, Byron, because we both got up too and we're both like thinking about stuff for the podcast. So it just happens that I ended up watching this video called Why Public Schools Are Going Broke in the US. This is by CNBC. I watched it during my breakfast and I shot it over to Byron and Liz and was like, hey, you think we could want to do a reaction podcast to this? Because there's so much stuff in here that I was listening in my head and going, what? Byron emails me back and is like, yes. And the things he gave back was the same things I was thinking about. So I was like, yes, we should talk about this. Unfortunately, Liz was unable to join us today, but since it was fresh in both of our minds, we thought, hey, let's do it. And we're gonna see if we can get Liz to also do a reaction video to this. So if you end up listening to this, you might hear Byron and I talking, and you might hear Liz interjecting. And I know you won't see it on screen, but those of you watching our video version of this, you probably will end up seeing Liz react back into this. So with that, Byron, do you feel like you can give a quick download on the video?
Yeah, I can try. So this video was related to basically K through 12 public education system in the United States. And there are environmental trends that have been happening with population, less children in school, things like this that is having impact on public schools because a lot of their state funding is connected with how many students are in those classes. And so schools have felt pressure where they're losing funding because of those changes. What has propped them up the last 5 years was special COVID funding that came from the federal government to help support schools with, bringing students back to school and, kind of catching students up from, the disruption of COVID. And that funding has ended. And as a result, there are a lot of schools that are in a oh no type of moment because their budgets that were propped up with this federal funding for the last couple of years are all of a sudden out of whack and upside down, and they are facing major decisions related to balancing their budgets. And a lot of people are very upset about these changes.
Oh, great summary. And I know we could discuss all the bigger things, but
so many things.
This is the ARC podcast. We're going to focus on some of the accounting aspects to really think about it, because both Byron and I's initial reaction was, where's the CFO in all of this? Like, who actually is approving these budgets and the way that these things are done? Because it was obvious to both of us that there isn't someone looking at the bigger picture. Now, I actually do a lot of work in the nonprofit space. And so one of the things that stood out to me, and Byron mentioned it, is there was a lot of funding that was basically coming from the federal government because of COVID related, effectively, grants. So grants, if you're not familiar with them, they usually have a time period on them and they're for very specific purposes. So you're not only constrained on what you can spend them on, and it's like from this time to this time. And so, like Byron said, the 5 years, we don't know if it was actually 5 or what it was, but basically it was a constrained time period. That funding is ending. So, and this is not an administration thing, because I know a lot of people like to
Right.
immediately jump on and go, this is Trump's administration cutting stuff. No, this is like the natural life grant funding ends. So grant funding is ending. It's never intended to be continuous. And some of what the video discusses is that some of the schools took this money, which they know is going to disappear, and we're using it to fund regular parts of operations or regular staff. And so that's where that's why both of us are like, where's the CFO or even the controller should be able to look at this and go, this is going to disappear. We need to start planning, not now, but years ahead, or at least a year ahead. What are we going to do when the money disappears? Now, the interesting other thing I thought in the video, which I do want to call out just so that we talk about it and then kind of put it on the side, there was definitely an emotional appeal in the video. You can kind of hear it where they're like, oh, this is so sad. The kids are going to lose things. You know, people are losing their jobs. We got to fight for the jobs. And Byron, I'll ask for your initial reaction on that.
Yeah, so my reaction is it felt very similar to the nonprofit world, right? Like where it's about the mission. It really is about the mission. It's about the kids, and like I empathize or sympathize with those folks who want to create a positive learning experience for these kids. And, however, the reality is, and especially our audience knows, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. Like you have to have the money to afford it. And, so my reaction is like, one, help me to understand what we thought was going to happen. Like who was looking ahead to anticipate this 12 months ago, 24 months ago, 36 months ago? Because as you said, grant funding has specific time frames, parameters in it. And I don't know if we were making decisions on hopes and dreams that those grants would just be renewed, but that is not the way that you run an organization that especially such a mission-driven organization that wants to be able to continue to support its customers, if you will. So it really like I understand the emotional concerns. I think there's also trust concerns because you have a lot of people who are making these pleas, teachers and general citizens who aren't in the room where there's budget planning, who don't have the full picture. So there's probably a lot of lack of transparency that's also leading to lack of understanding to, when you make these pleas to understand where it's all going. And I mean, one of the things that struck me, which was, something that I already knew somewhat, that in recent years, there had been significant growth in administrators within public education system. And in that video, they actually showed the state of Texas, and over the course from like the last decade, like 2014 through 2024, the number of students only increased by 6%, but the number of employees, something like 15%. And this is anecdotal, but my understanding is a large percentage of that growth is not teachers, it is administrators. So it really makes you wonder, like, do we have to cut teachers? Like, without knowing the numbers, like maybe this is more of a overhead type of overspending that we need to look at.
Completely agree with you on that. There's also been that trend in higher education, and I don't have the direct research to cite, but I've heard it said multiple times in multiple conferences that I've been to, how the administrative costs in higher education has, I think it's like tripled or quadrupled. It's like some huge number over the last, and this is, I believe, the last 20 years, might even be 30 years. But it's a trend that we've seen. And the same thing is happening in the colleges as well, where you're seeing them end up cutting professors and leaving administration intact when, as you've indicated, I would lean towards, hey, we got to optimize this administration stuff and get it back down to a lower level and keep the teachers and the professors in the classrooms or where they can be most effective helping the students.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's, that is something also that I would argue it's interesting. The government steps in to fund things and do things to create accessibility and various different reasons. But I think there's also a something that gets missed in potential side effects or outcomes of a lot of that. Because if you look at the higher education, I would say a lot of that, what has funded a lot of that growth in administration has been higher tuition, which has been enabled because of student aid that has, allowed these enormous loans to be taken on by students and created this bloat in the higher education system. So you have both the, grade school education and higher education where getting constrained now because government funding is going away and they've been spending ahead of their skis effectively and now kind of in a victim type of position where they don't know where to go and how to make good business decisions. And again, the thing that stood out, I guess, to bring this all the way back to where we kind of like want to frame this conversation is where the hell are the accountants in these conversations? Because I don't see them. They're not in the videos. They're not in the articles. I don't know where they are. And I don't know if they're just hiding out or if they're just not being paid attention to.
Well, unfortunately, government accountants are often not paid attention to. Having the early part of my career when I was with PwC, that was actually one of my main thing was doing government auditing. Hawaii is a little nuanced because Hawaii is such a small state. Our state auditor only has so much staff, so they actually outsource or co-source, I guess is actually the word, co-source the government audits out to all the accounting firms. So it was interesting because I found out afterwards, oh, this is not a normal practice or this is not a majority practice because most of the state auditors do, do all the work on that. But through that, I got to really kind of see the work of government accountants, which I thought was interesting because it's not your traditional, if anyone's not taking the class, it's fund accounting. It's very different. It's this whole year to year type of thing. The federal government is even more weird. And then I actually got exposure to Department of Defense budgeting, which is this whole other animal, like crazy animal with appropriations and not just appropriations and allocations, which is like the stuff coming from Congress, but all these other things going on in there that just create this whole mess around budgeting and accounting, which I won't get into more, but just know that it's very, very different. Like if we
it's
were
not
to
just cash in, cash out.
If we were to look at like for-profit accounting on a scale of 1 to 10 on complexity, for-profit accounting is probably like to me like a 2 or a 3. Government accounting is like a 12. It's like crazy different.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
I was gonna say, I digress. To close that thought, I digress. But this is one of those things. I feel like we need more government accountants and more capable government accountants that are trained to look at this bigger picture. Because unfortunately, a lot of them get shoved into this hole and they're like, just look at the budget. And like you said, we never hear from them. Versus we hear from the CFOs, especially in the larger companies. They play a much larger role in the running of the organizations.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm in Maryland, proximity to Baltimore City, and there's, for years there has been frustration with Baltimore City public schools because their per student spending is 2 and 3 times higher than every other county in the state of Maryland. And there's been audits and all of these things to tried to determine like, why is the spending so high? Who's accountable for that spending? And who should be responsible for funding it, because they're looking to the state of Maryland to say, hey, we need more money, we need more funds. We have some of the worst schools in the state, yet we're spending the most money. And the rest of the state is saying, hey, like, leave our money in our pockets, because our school districts are in good shape. But again, there's very little visibility to the accounting or the accountants who are managing this stuff, who are putting budgets together. There's no real reconciliation of what the budget was versus what actually was spent. It's really frustrating as an accountant to hear about these types of things and think about all the accounting things that are going into these decisions or lack thereof. And this article that you shared through the accountant lens is just like, it's almost so painfully obvious that it hurts to listen to it.
Oh, that's so funny. That was my reaction too. It was hurting. It was like hurting me spiritually listening to this as an accountant.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, and you want to see the numbers. I'm like, give me the spreadsheet, like, show me the numbers. Where is all this spending going?
You also raised an interesting point, because you said numbers and then you said spending. And the other thing that stood out to me from this was they kept talking about enrollment declines. We just talked about increases in staff, and it made me kind of ask the question of, are they only looking at the dollars, or are they really looking at the whole picture of numbers? Because I teach a lot of classes on budgeting and forecasting. And one of the best practices we teach is you should be using non-financial data to drive your financial forecast. Like in schools, it would be the number of students, to then look at the number of classes that I have to hold, for the number of teachers then that I need to staff those classes, right? And looking at these things. And one of the things that stood out to me in the video was, are they actually looking at this holistically? And when I say holistically, first at the school level, because some of it is, they talked about declines, but I'm also kind of, are they looking at this then perhaps even at the district level? Because, yeah, with decreasing populations, lower birth rates, right, which results in the lower enrollments,
Yep.
should we actually now be looking at potentially closing schools? And I know that's a hard one, because I was part of that emotional plea in there. But again, the accountant side of me goes, I feel for them. But if we're going to do something that's not sustainable, like if we're not getting the right teachers, we're actually potentially hurting the kids more than forcing them to have more of a commute.
Yeah, they actually did that in the county I live in Carroll County. It was about, gosh, might be 10 years ago now, probably 5 years. They closed one of the high schools because the population wasn't growing. They looked ahead to the number of students that would be coming into the high schools, and they had 3 high schools that were all underpopulated. So they made the decision, and it came against a lot of frustration from people, understandably so. But I would love to see the spreadsheet of how much money they saved by, shutting down that school, the operations and the overhead of that school, spreading those students and teachers and everything else into the other schools. I have to imagine that there was significant savings and probably a net positive in the overall, educational experience for the students. And so those are very difficult conversations, and you're going to come into a lot of people with, emotionally charged feelings about those types of decisions to be made. But, in this video, they were looking at Pasadena schools in California, and, the decisions they were having to make there related to layoffs and everything else are also just devastating decisions to make. And to your point, the unit economics, they even said in California, it's interesting, the schools get funded based on the number of students that show up to class. It's not even just the number of students in the district, but it's the number that show up. And so my question, again, putting on my accounting head or hat, is pre-COVID, I don't know what the budget scenario was, but my assumption is we were able to support the services necessary for the students. Why now, 5 years later, without this government funding, can we not basically do the same thing that we were doing 5 years ago? Like there's something missing there that I'm not understanding. And I think it is that surge in administrative overhead that was funded by the government funding.
Interesting. Again, I want to come back to what you said about the closing of the school.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing that made me think of was we're all talking about this teacher shortage. Well, if we start to consolidate some of the schools, that actually helps also solve that problem as well. So it's not just a cost savings, it also solves some other issues that we might have as well.
Yeah, and actually, on that note, I know you're also a fan of your Undivided Attention podcast. They just did an episode, I don't know if you listened to it, with two educators. And it was about the use of AI in schools. And part of it was like about how it's not being done, they're not implementing properly. But, there was a lot of conversation about like, is there going to be opportunity with new technology to be able to, improve the education for the students without requiring more humans to be in the classrooms? A really interesting conversation, and I think there's a lot of potential there.
I totally agree with you there. That was when Khan Academy first came out, right? That was the one to me. I looked at this and I went, this is brilliant, and we need to do this across all topics, including accounting. Kind of look at it.
Without a doubt.
Man, now that I think about that, was that like 10 years ago-ish, maybe?
When Khan Academy first came out? Oh, actually, I'm pretty sure it was longer than that now, believe it or not. It shows how old we are. But yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the policy, when my daughters were growing up, for them, like Khan Academy initially was really math focused. It expanded, but when my girls were young, the deal was, I will help you with any math homework you have, but you have to show up having watched the Khan Academy video and ready to explain to me based on the Khan Academy video how to do it. That really improved everything, and they still think I'm a math genius because of it. So I was able to keep that intact. But, they have also done stuff with OpenAI with their Khan Amigo, their AI tutor. And it's incredible what they are doing. I get really excited when I think about those types of initiatives.
Hey, you had shared before, I think was it your sister-in-law or somebody's reaction to your comment too about the adoption of tech of AI for the classroom?
Yeah. I had a conversation with my brother's girlfriend, who's a teacher, a high school teacher, and she had kind of a visceral reaction, and it was partially due to my framing about AI potentially being able to fix what I consider broadly to be a broken educational system in this country. And, she was really unhappy with that framing because she felt that, there's a lot of people who are doing really hard work and it's not broken. But through the conversation, we both, found agreement that based on today's educational practices, there's not enough teachers. And even though, and the ones that are there are getting burned out because they're having to work so hard to, take care of classrooms that have too many students in them, keep up with the pressures of the parents and everything else going on. And, ultimately we found agreement that, if tools come out that can improve those experiences for teachers, then it would be a net positive. But, again, it's kind of one of those like, people are very passionate about the mission and, are very threatened by, outside forces potentially impacting it.
Yeah. So I bring that up for two reasons. One, just the whole analogy to what's happening in accounting, right? All three of us, I know Liz too,
Yeah.
we all are very like adopt technology, adopt technology, adopt technology. And when you're in this people crisis and you see the shortage of accountants also being talked about, and then some of the arguments we get against that is also like the clients are not going to get served as well and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, the demands of clients are only increasing. Staffing is not increasing, just like enrollments are not. Staffing is not increasing either.
Yeah.
So we got to adopt the technology to let us focus on where we as human accountants can actually do better, which is all this critical thinking that we're actually saying, where's the CFO? Why isn't someone doing all the critical thinking around the bigger picture of what's happening?
Dude, what an amazing parallel. You are so spot on. I mean, I think that is absolutely right. And, we talk to accounting firms all the time, and so many of them are stressed out. They're trying to do their best. There's not enough hours in the day to support all their clients, or they're turning away clients because they just can't take on anymore. And, the opportunities with technology, especially in this day and age, to improve things. I mean, oh man, I just it, it is hard to imagine for the three of us who have always been looking ahead and looking for new tools to imagine saying, no, I don't want that, even though it could help me.
But I will raise one thing, which I think, and I do hope Liz does the reaction to this one because it's about her. Because I was helping her with some of her tech stack, and I know she gets frustrated a lot because she's like, it does some of the things I want, but it doesn't do everything, or it does these things wrong. But yet you see her still push forward with the adoption. And I think that's so important too, because, and I've heard you say it as well, we're never going to get that 100% solution, right?
Right.
You got to move forward with the 70 or 80 so that you can get the 70 or 80% out of the way. And then you just have to really focus or spend the more taxing physical time on or manual time on the 20 or 30% rather than having to do it on 100%, which kind of takes me to the other point I wanted to make off of your early one, which is when you put it in the context of education, it is making the teachers' jobs easier, not the administrator's jobs easier, the teacher's job easier, and easier in a good way, because they're not slacking. I know teachers, all the teachers I know are busting their butts, right?
Yeah.
And granted, yes, it's busting your butts for 9 months out of the year, but that's also less than our 4 months of busy seasons or
Right.
4.5 months of busy season. So that I think that's an interesting parallel that our professions sort of have too. So coming back to it, it's the analogy to the teachers is the staff. The administrators are the partners. So
Yeah.
when we talk about these things from an accounting firm perspective, to me, I'm like, you got to think about your staff, and you got to think about, because they're the ones serving the clients, just like the teachers are serving the kids.
Boots on the
And
ground.
this might be heretical too. We got to reduce that administrative layer, the partner layer, or maybe make it more accessible, which will increase it. But we got to realize we got to serve the clients.
Yeah, that's that whole upside down triangle that it has been going around with these top heavy organizations, and you're so right. And I mean honestly, even if I can appreciate teachers being a little bit slower to adopt new technology and things, because I mean, for what it's worth, you are experimenting on children. So when you want to implement things, you want to be careful and make sure that it's meaningful and you're doing it with intention. But when you look at that administrative layer and all the operational stuff, oh my God, the amount of technology that could be deployed to streamline process operations, and that you can be a little bit more reckless in a sense as far as experimenting with new tools to find those opportunities, because you're not like messing with the minds of children. But there's a lot of stuff. And if I was one of the school systems looking at these budget constraints, I would be exploring every avenue possible for ways that we could reduce the amount of overhead. And unfortunately, that will mean people potentially have to lose their jobs. But that is something where let's look back at the budgets and see if we should have ever hired these people to begin with.
And coming back to, yes, that's the start of this, is that's what grant funding generally should be used for. Capacity building, infrastructure build out, right? Get the stuff in there that helps you be more efficient, or helps you not need to continue to hire, because the population is shrinking. There's going to be less people to hire. The more you can automate and make it where, hey, I don't have to have a person running this all the time, or increase the number of people to keep this thing running, that'll reduce all of that and potentially keep your operational costs low if you're actually making this. And robots don't take holiday PTO or have complaints about other coworkers. Reduce your HR nightmare.
That's it. That's it. And there's plenty of people who could listen to this type of stuff and really get upset about they're replacing humans. The thing that everybody needs to not lose sight of is there's not enough people to do all the things. All the things are continuing to grow, but the people are not. So it's there is no lack of opportunity for the humans, and that's not going away anytime soon.
I love that point and totally agree with you. All right, let me try and summarize a bunch of what we had, and I'm going to keep it a little more in the accounting context. So the accounting aspects that we kind of looked at here, kind of budgeting and forecasting, really this is one of the key things we do as accountants, especially at the CFO level. It's looking at the bigger picture. What are the business drivers that are coming in? Number of students, in some cases, number of students showing up for class, matching the funding to the type of spend, and also budgeting for the right period. So if funding's going to run out, how are we already working on budgeting for the next year, or how are we making adjustments so that if the funding runs out, or if it's not renewed, as in some of the other cases, that you're not at a complete lurch. And it's a balancing of some of this emotions and making sure that we are showing empathy. Accountants are often accused of not having that, but if anyone's listened to any of our conversations, there's a ton of empathy. But the key thing that we do as accountants is we take the objective view, or unbiased or independent view, which is we take that step back, put both our emotions and everybody else's emotions not totally off, but just a little off to the side, and take that step back and go, all right, let's look at this bigger lens and let's figure out what is the right decision to make. And notice I didn't say right business decision to make. What's the right decision to make? Because we got to balance all of these different factors as we look at decisions. And then secondarily, what is the sustainable decision to make? Because this has to be something like government cannot, public schools cannot go under.
Nope.
Right. And so I'm going to end that one with, hey, those of you out there that this is resonating with, we need more government accountants, and we need more government auditors who are actually looking at this stuff and asking the questions. Why was this decision made this way? Is this sustainable? Is there a going concern for this school or for this government entity? So there's a lot of opportunity. It's not one that's talked about a lot, but there's a lot of opportunity in government accounting and auditing as well.
Well said.
All right, then with that, we'll call it a wrap today, and let's hope Lynn was Lynn. Liz will be able to do a reaction for us to our reactions to this video. Take care,
Liz. Be nice.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.